there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live, as always, from the Helmet Sunday Hall of Fame in my basement in Fort Collins, Colorado. Holy smokes, what a fun episode. I start this show off every single time by saying that I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo. Well, guess what? Here is the founder and principal of SportsLogos.net, Chris Creamer. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paul. And what an honor to have you introduce yourself in that manner every single episode.
It's I love it so much. I tell people all the time that you gave me my break, and we talked about this on episode 1 of this podcast. And I should point out before we get too far in, because it's just so easy to just start talking about whatever, right? This is episode 50, and so I'm having you back. You were my guest on episode 1 as the guy who gave me my break and who is the owner, the founder of the website that has meant so much to Sports Logos fans all these years, 25 years, a quarter century of sportslogos.net. It's incredible. So thanks for all that you do for Sports Logos fans, and thanks for everything you've done for me. I have had such a kick writing for your website and learning about minor league baseball logos and this industry.
Well, thanks so much, Paul. And I got to say, congratulations on 50 episodes. I do like that. What's the term for once every 50? I don't know. Some sort of Latin term.
Is it sesquicentennial? What's that? That's
one in, is that every one?
That might be 150, because that's the Park Service is about to do their sesquicentennial. So I don't know. We got to look. We'll look that up. We'll drop it in after. We'll fix it in post and pretend like we both knew all along.
What I'm getting to is that I got to do episode 100 now.
Yes. Yeah. And the only other episode that I have lined up is that Todd Radom and I are going to talk about typographic ligatures in episode 58. So that's something that we've had lined up for a little while. Since episode 2, Todd was my guest on episode 2. So
it's a very niche audience, the typographic.
It's definitely that. It's definitely that. Well, that's a really fun thing that I've discovered about this podcast, and I'm sure that you've discovered as, the founder and host of sportslogos.net, is that there is this passion out there for branding, for sports branding, right? So it's been, so much fun for me to be a part of that. But I'll just ask you, it's been almost a year. I've done an episode a week since December of last year. So I'll just ask you, what's been the biggest story in the sports logos world for the last year?
I think it's got to be like over the history of time, right? We have to look at this. Let's zoom 25, 50 years into the future and look back at 2022 and what's everyone going to be talking about in terms of what has changed in the sports branding world. And ultimately, it's going to be the shift away from Native American mascots, names, and logos, right? It's easy to forget that that happened this year.
Yeah.
But this is the first year of the Washington Commanders. This is the first year of the Cleveland Guardians. The Guardians on a bit of a run this year. Maybe there is something to that curse of the Wahoo. I don't know.
At the time of this recording, we are approaching Game 5 of the Guardians and Yankees in the ALDS. By the time this drops, we'll know everything that happened. We'll know what happened to my Phillies. I'm a nervous wreck. I've been a nervous wreck for like 2 weeks and continue to be. The Phillies are about to face the Padres. So anyway, I interrupted you there, but we'll know whether the curse of the Wahoo has been fully rectified.
I think regardless of what the Guardians do from this point out, you have to be satisfied with what they did this season, right? The White Sox are supposed to run away with the division. And here the Guardians are now one win away from the ALCS. And, again, by the time this comes out, maybe they're in the World Series. Maybe they're beating up your Phillies, going to Game 7. Who knows?
Whoa, that would be a thing. If my Phillies and the Guardians are in Game 7 of the World Series, I'm probably dead by now. Like, I'm probably just don't even bother calling me, right? Because it's like the Braves series, the Cardinal series and then the Braves series practically ended me. And so, yeah, this is I spend the whole year rooting for my team to make the playoffs, and then they do, and then I'm too nervous to watch, right? Like it's
that's being a baseball fan. And I'll tell you, as like 3 weeks ago, I'm part of a Blue Jays season ticket group, so we were doing a draw for Blue Jays postseason tickets, and nobody wanted to take Game 7 of the World Series because there's no way that the Jays will host a Game 7 of the World Series. And I said, I piped up, I go, well, actually, if they play the Padres or Phillies, they'll get Game 7, and everyone laughed.
Yeah, and now look,
Padres, Phillies.
I'll tell you, my brother actually went to both home games for the Phillies Braves series this past weekend, and then last night, at the time of this recording, was in Philadelphia for the Cowboys Eagles game. So he basically is not going to get his voice back for a month, I think, at this point.
Gotta get it back. There's more Phillies playoff games to go to.
Totally. So the point that you make, though, I mean, it's a really good point. I don't want to get away from this. The shift away from Native American based branding is a really important one. And, to see it with two major teams, a few more teams yet to go. And the Phillies obviously played the Braves. I have to say the Phillies fans were mocking the tomahawk chop. And even that, I was just like, please stop, please stop, please stop. I mean, that, like, even sarcastically, I was just like, please don't do the chop. That story, and I wrote once, I covered the Spokane Indians for sportslogos.net, and that was such a great example of a team working with their community to really approach that branding in an appropriate way, and for their logo to be based on a feather that was drawn by a community member, and for them to have like educational materials around the stadium, to commemorate the local tribe of Indians. It's like, it can be done respectfully, but the Spokane Indians are the only team I know that have actually done it respectfully. I don't know if there's another one out there.
It's remarkable that these teams weren't following the Spokane Indians model, right? Like the Cleveland could have reached out to Spokane and said, "Hey, how can we do this?" And like, you guys have clearly done it the right way, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
they reached out to the local tribes and they had them design things, and they even made a uniform and a logo in the local tribal language. I can't remember which one it was.
It's in the Hall of Fame. It says Spokane in the Salish language, and it's in the Hall of Fame for being the first written native language on a professional sports uniform in the United States.
Like, how perfect was that? And that seems like a fairly easy thing, just go out and do, like, try to make a show. They always say it's we're doing this to honor the local communities and all that, but they don't ever really seem to make an effort to actually prove that that's what they're doing.
Right.
But Spokane, they did it. They went out and they did it.
They did it. And I think the educational materials that they have around the ballpark are so important, right? To be like, here's the people who have lived on this land forever, and here's how we're honoring them as a team by actually working with them. And so, yeah, I love that story. I actually really love that story. Well, so speaking of uniforms, Major League Baseball is doing the City Connect this year, and I guess last year. When did that start? When did City Connect start?
That was 2021, last season.
Okay, so last season they started the City Connect. It's been a little bit hit or miss. I think some of them are really good. I love the Marlins one. I love the Diamondbacks, the Serpientes that they're doing there. The San Diego Padres like Trident wrapper one, I don't really love that one. But the thing about the City Connect branding, I think, is obviously the NBA has done sort of a similar thing. But when I saw it, I was like, oh, Major League Baseball is more involved with minor league baseball now. They're taking a page out of minor league baseball's playbook here by saying, we're going to just introduce entirely separate brands for this team, partially to sell merchandise, but also to generate like a certain amount of buzz, I guess. What do you think is the relationship there between the City Connect program and minor league baseball, if any?
Honestly, I don't think there is. Okay. And I know as a minor league baseball reporter, that's not the best news. But based off of my own personal feelings, I think this is more of a Nike-led thing. I think they saw the success of this in the NBA and said, hey, how can we do this in Major League Baseball? Because I have a feeling the NFL isn't going to say yes to something like this. And there's a lot more you can do with a baseball uniform than you can do with a football uniform, right? Especially with the alternate helmets, and there's only 17 or 18 games a year. So I think this was Nike led. And my thoughts on it are, well, like, you gave some good examples. I think Miami is probably one of the best ones. I do like the White Sox one as well. That the black with the reverse pinstripes. But I really prefer a uniform feel like it's actually part of the team's identity. And I know they're kind of trying to go away from this, but you need to feel some sort of unity with the brand, right? You need to be able to look at a game and know that player plays for that team. So a team like, well, let's say the Boston Red Sox, right? I think that's the most obvious example where they're wearing a uniform that features, doesn't feature the same typeface in any way, doesn't feature the same colors in any way. It could literally be like a generic team from Boston. There's no connection to the Red Sox whatsoever. And even the ball cap looks more like UCLA than it does the Red Sox. That to me is a bit of a miss. It's got a good story, a nice story, but it doesn't feel like a Red Sox uniform. Whereas a team like the White Sox. A team like the Cubs, even though I think the Wrigleyville thing is a little gimmicky,
Yeah.
that feels like a White Sox or a Cubs uniform. Another one you mentioned, Arizona. When that one first came out, I had the pleasure of talking to Derek Hall, president of the Diamondbacks, and I said to him during that interview, I was like, "Look, like I love this. Like I feel like this could be like maybe the team should be called this instead of the Diamondbacks."
Right. Right.
It's such a unique name, and I don't know how the locals feel about it, but uh, at least the jersey. I'm not sure about wearing the matching color pants, but that yellow jersey with the serpientes across the front and that the logo where the snake is in a triangle on the sleeve. I just love that whole thing. I feel like that's maybe something the Diamondbacks could do full time. And maybe ultimately that's what we see from some of these City Connect uniforms. It gives a team an opportunity to say, hey, let's try something off the wall, try something crazy. Let's see what sticks, right? Let's throw a whole new recipe against the wall, and you get something like an Arizona where, hey, this looks pretty good. We kind of like it. But on the other hand, you get something like a San Diego where it is fun. It's very Southern California.
Yeah.
But, the Padres already have such a unique look that maybe they don't need to go this unique in another direction.
Another one that we haven't talked about is the Rockies, which essentially looks like the license plate. I actually saw a game in Colorado this year where the Rockies were playing in their license plate City Connect uniforms. And I mean, I don't want to second guess professional designers. And I feel like, old man yells at cloud here, but they're just terrible. They're just uniquely terrible. These Rockies uniforms. And they've got these awesome sort of visual signifiers all over Colorado that they could be basing these uniforms off of. They've got these like super fun, like welcome to Colorado. Every highway that enters the state, you've got these awesome, like welcome to Colorado signs, welcome, colorful Colorado. There's all these so that one just feels like a total whiff to me, right? Like it does, though. It sort of raises the question of like the teams that have not yet unveiled, like what are they going to do? Your Blue Jays have not yet unveiled a City Connect. My Phillies have not unveiled a City Connect. I'm deathly afraid they're going to do a Liberty Bell for the Phillies, but who knows? Maybe they'll do something with Rocky, right? What do you want them to do? What do you envision for like a Blue Jays City Connect?
Here's what I've learned about the City Connect program so far. I never get what I expect.
Okay.
Yeah. So like with the Rockies, okay, it's going to be the Colorado State flag, right?
Right.
But we're never getting what we're expecting. Like whatever's obvious, they're kind of going away from that. So with the Phillies, I like the idea of Rocky, right? Like, so Liberty Bell, that seems obvious. Anything patriotic, USA Independence Hall, anything like that, that seems like, okay, obviously they're going to do that, which makes me feel, well, obviously they're not going to do that at this point. With the Blue Jays, it's, well, obviously they're going to do something Canada related. It's going to be, a Maple Leaf Love Fest, or at the very least, it's going to be like Drake related or the Six related. But I have no idea what they're going to do. And you're asking, what do I want them to do? I want them to just look like the Blue Jays. That's all I care about. Incorporate the font, the colors somehow in there. Don't, oh man, they're going to go black and gold or something.
Right. Almost like a color rush, like the NFL does the color rush uniforms. Like I would rather see the City Connect uniforms, look more like the color rush uniforms, just like the brands, but more so.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, again, with the color rush, you at least know what teams are playing, because and the NFL has great rules about that, where you can't do anything in your alternate uniform or any other uniform that isn't currently part of the team's color scheme.
Yeah.
You just can't go completely off the wall. You need to at least make this look like a team uniform, or a throwback uniform, right? So a lot of people say the NFL is not fun, and to an extent they're right. But I think on this issue, they got that nailed down.
Yeah. Speaking of just draping uniforms in the Canadian flag, I got to see my third professional baseball game in Canada this past summer. I was with my girlfriend, Amy. We were in Vancouver, and we saw a Vancouver Canadiens game.
Nice.
And earlier in the day, we went to Bowen Island, and we sat there like on a deck overlooking the Salish Sea and having some poutine and drinking some really good beer. And so I was enjoying I was enjoying your home country very much. I realized I was way over. I was thousands of miles away from where you are, but it was I was thinking of you while I was there. So
I'm glad you enjoyed that. I've never been to Vancouver myself, but that's my list on my list of places to go. And thanks for acknowledging that it's thousands of miles away, because the amount of times I talk to Americans and they say, "Oh, hey, I was in Edmonton once," or I was like, that's like me
right.
saying to someone from New York, "Hey, yeah, no, I was in Denver."
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I hope you waved, right?
Yeah.
I have been to games in. I went to one Montreal Expos game, and I went to a Quebec Capital game.
Oh,
I have never been to a Blue Jays game though. It's one of my major league ballparks that I know. I need to get there. We need to go
yeah.
have a helmet Sunday together.
Have a helmet Sunday. Do a live edition of the podcast.
I
Maybe
can't wait. Absolutely. I've got a little recorder plugs into my phone. I'll bring it with me. We'll record an interview at a Blue Jays game. We're gonna make this happen.
Absolutely.
We had a near miss. We almost met at a Buffalo Bisons game. And
yeah, it was one day off. I was in Buffalo the day before or something.
Man, would have been great. Would have been great.
Are the Rockies Phillies coming to town next year?
I'm going to check it out. Every team's playing every team next year. So
right, yeah.
One of them's bound to be in Toronto. I just might need to just make it a point to get to Toronto. So
you get to see the new Rogers Center renovations they're doing this offseason.
I'm excited for it. It's I've been to, I think 21 of the current stadiums. And so definitely want to.
You got to do it. It's one of the oldest ballparks in baseball now.
Got to check it out. Isn't that amazing? Like how young a
blows
stadium can be and still be one of the oldest in the baseball.
Is it young though? This is its 33rd, 34th year now.
I mean, for a huge building like a baseball stadium, it just doesn't feel that old to say it's the Rockies ballpark, I think, is the third oldest in the National League after the Cubs and the Dodgers. Like, I mean, it's
to me, Coors Field is still a new stadium.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. 1995, 1993. No, 95.
95. Yeah. 2 years at Mile High, right?
Absolutely. Right. Exactly. Okay. Speaking of alternate uniforms, we were talking about the City Connect program. Mm-hmm. I love minor league baseball, as you know. I love the Marvel comic universe. I do not love, I know you're laughing already. I do not love the Marvel minor league baseball crossover logos. And I don't know, I can't exactly put my finger on why, like what it is about combining these two things that I like that has created something where I just sort of shrug at it. And maybe it's because they take themselves too seriously. I don't know. It's but I can't you've been obviously covering those releases as they've been happening. So what's your thought on the feedback that the Marvel minor league baseball crossover has been getting?
Not good, Paul. Not good. They took a shot, and it's one of those things where on paper it sounds like a good idea. For how many years has minor league baseball been putting out alternate identities, putting out themed uniforms? And it seemed only natural. Hey, we've been doing this sort of unofficially for years. Let's actually do it for real. Let's reach out to the studio who makes these characters, and let's actually make something.
Yeah.
And it didn't hit. It's something, like you say, something's just not quite right. And when I was first brought this idea, and I was like, okay, this sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. I'm excited. And then I saw the designs and I thought, okay, something missed here. And, you said I've been covering them. I stopped covering after day 2.
Yeah.
And I know that's bad as a logo reporter, but I just couldn't get excited for it anymore. Yeah. And the audience sadly did not like them either. They almost wanted me to stop reporting on it.
Yeah.
There's just so many of them quick, and so many of them just weren't hitting it. I tried to find a couple of positives on day 1. I thought Somerset looked pretty good. Mm-hmm. I thought Buffalo was, there's some potential for the Bisons there as well. Yeah. But after that, it was a lot of just cookie cutter. Let's take the team's mascot, put him in a superhero pose, throw a cape on him, and call it a day. Yeah. I think it would have been great, working with Marvel, if maybe these teams incorporated some of Marvel's characters into their designs, and maybe there's an Iron Man version of a team's logo,
right?
And that is Marvel, right?
Iron Man is Marvel. Yep.
So I think that's where they could have gone, and maybe they should have gone, and maybe Marvel didn't want to do that, maybe the teams didn't want to do that. But when you say Marvel is designing your logo, you kind of expect it to look like Marvel's designing your logo.
I had high hopes, right? And and there are some programs that minor league baseball does where you expect them to sort of fall flat. I thought the Copa de la Diversión program was going to fall flat.
Mm-hmm.
And it is awesome. Like they just roll out just great. I mean, talk about brands that could replace, the permanent brand. There are so many Copa brands out there that could absolutely be. And I would never want to see the Albuquerque Isotopes go away, but their Mariachis brand is awesome, right? Like, and so there's so many. So it was just such an unusual thing to see minor league baseball kind of, swing and miss on this. There's a lot of baseball metaphors on this podcast. You may have caught that.
You just have a list next year.
I do. Yeah. I just have to check one off each episode, but it's, the concern obviously is that this came right after the Major League Baseball's Vogon Destructor Fleet hostile takeover of minor league baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question that I think a lot of minor league baseball fans, and I hang out on Twitter with a lot of like the most positive people you'll ever find on Twitter, right? Like, I mean, some of these people are just absolutely just the, golden heartest. That's probably not a phrase. The goldenest hearted, I don't know. Some of the kindest, most positive people you'll ever meet on Twitter who were just sort of shrugging at the Marvel thing. The concern is obviously this all happened right after the Major League Baseball takeover.
Mm-hmm.
Is there concern in your mind that so much of what minor league baseball has been doing well may be interfered with by Major League Baseball's takeover?
Well, I guess that depends. If Major League Baseball had their hands in this and they didn't have their hands in Copa, then I'm kind of scared, right? Yeah. Like if this is what the future is, I don't feel like this is Major League Baseball as much as it is hiring a non-sports design company to design for sports and expecting it to work well. So, maybe the next edition that comes out next year, whenever, the next minor league baseball universal redesign program happens, if we see the same thing again, okay, maybe I'm starting to sweat a little bit.
Right.
I'm confident that this is just like, okay, we reached out to Marvel. Marvel doesn't design for sports, and we're seeing the result of that. But you bring out the Copa was just amazing. You were talking about that earlier. Whoever designed Copa, put them in charge of whatever next minor league baseball is doing. Just every single one of those was, as you said, hit it out of the park. A grand slam, hit for the cycle. I don't have my list here.
They gave it 110%. Took it one logo at a time. And a lot of those were created by different people. I know that Ryan Foose, Fooser Design, I know that he did a bunch of them. This brings up one of the things that I have enjoyed so much about this podcast is getting to talk to designers, right? Like getting to know them and the work they do and their process, and just to talk to them about, sort of a brand at a time. We mentioned Todd Radom, such a good guy. Your co-author, Todd Radom, I held this up earlier. We were bantering before, but The Fabric of the Game is the book that you and Todd wrote about hockey uniforms. This is an absolute pleasure for anyone who is involved in or enjoys sports branding, and it came with my signed Chris Creamer baseball card here. So it's
hockey card.
This one sits here. I'm sorry. It's a hockey card. It's kind of like a baseball cap, regardless of the logo on it is a baseball cap. So, but I guess that's a hockey card. But so Todd Radom, obviously Dan Simon, who created the logo for my podcast. I hope in the Creamer Awards at the end of the year, you have a podcast category, because I think Baseball by Design and Dan Simon's logo that he created for it might take it this year. Obviously Jason Klein with Brandiose. I've gotten to talk with, a bunch of people who, I've really enjoyed getting to know them and their work. You cover sports as your full-time gig, right? Like this is something you do all day, every day. Who are the people who you talk to who, you really enjoy hearing from, who have, sort of special insight into your world?
Well, it's such a tight community, right? It's very small. And what I have always loved about the logo design community, once I've gotten myself into it, not as a designer, but as a reporter on it, is that everyone seems to actually genuinely like each other. And they don't really, I mean, I'm sure they're competing with each other, but they don't treat each other as competitors. They treat each other as friends who are all working together on similar jobs. And some of the people I talked to, I mean, you mentioned Todd, obviously I talked to him a lot. He and I went to a Jays game up at Rogers Center.
I was so jealous. I was so jealous. I wanted to be there.
I rented out a suite and everything. even though I couldn't afford it, I did it anyway.
Uh,
And we had, speaking of designers, we had Richard Walker, who is a bit of an unknown legend in Canadian sports design, as he designed the logos for the Toronto Blue Jays, the original 1977 logo, as well as like Hockey Canada, Canada Soccer, the Tim Hortons logo, working
awesome.
with Labatt's and all that. So just having the three of us in that suite talking to each other all night was quite an experience. But getting to talk to, like, Jason, the guys from Brandiose, I
Sure.
spent an afternoon at their studio in San Diego just before COVID hit.
Yeah.
Talking to Brian Gundel, I speak to him a lot. A lot of the guys at Adidas I talk to,
Yeah.
Dan Simon, the guys at Fan Brands. There's so many of them that, and every single one of them is very nice, and
Yeah.
it's just been a dream to talk to some of these guys. And as a fan of logos, right? Like some of these guys, I grew up doodling their logos, right?
Yeah.
Just as a kid, and now I'm speaking with them and getting
Right.
some of the stories behind their designs, and it's just been surreal being able to talk to these people, and every single one of them has been an absolute joy to talk to, and couldn't have been any nicer.
They're so accessible, and I mean, Dan Simon came to a baseball game with us during Baseball Palooza, right? Like that was
Nice.
incredible. He came and had a beer and played our dollar game with us, and that was great, right? Like, and I got to talk with your friends from Torch Creative, Brad and
Torch. I didn't mention Torch.
Mike.
They
Brad
designed
and
my
Mike,
logo and everything. Oh,
they came up. Well, I was going to bring them up regardless.
okay.
We talked about that on the episode about the Midland Rockhounds.
Mhm.
Brad and Mike came on and talked about that very well received rebrand that they did for that team. I mean, their new Rocky the Rockhound was absolutely great. So, speaking of Major League Baseball and logos, the next year's All-Star Game logo in Seattle was really super well received. Like more than most, I think, more than most All-Star Game logos, this one really got a lot of positive attention out there. I think people really like the Seattle brand. With apologies to your Blue Jays, I think people really like the Mariners brand, and it might be one of the reasons, apart from the fact that they haven't won in 20 years, that people really sort of took to that team as they started having success the last couple of years.
Mhm.
How much do you think those like pleasing colors, the teal and the northwest green and the navy that they use, right? Like how much does a brand, do you think, affect sort of the national perception of a team? That might be a goofy question to ask you, but
Oh, it's a good question, and one which requires a little bit of thought. I think a pleasing logo and color scheme certainly helps, right? Like Seattle's a great example. They have a color scheme that not many teams have, right?
mm-hmm,
Especially in Major League Baseball, navy blue, northwest green, as you mentioned,
mm-hmm,
the silver,
mm-hmm,
and the fact that they come from a city, Seattle, which is far away from any other Major League Baseball team. They don't win every single season. They're not like
mm-hmm,
a New York Yankees, where either you love them or you hate them,
mm-hmm,
despite the fact that they have amazing uniforms. Yeah, I think it does help, but there's other factors in there, right? Like the San Diego Padres. I don't think anybody really cared about them when they wore those Los Angeles Dodger clone uniforms a few
yeah,
years ago. But
yeah,
now they go to the swing and friar brown and gold, and suddenly everybody loves the San Diego Padres outside of Los Angeles.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I do think that branding does make a difference, maybe subconsciously. The Milwaukee Brewers, another good example, right? Like
yeah.
when they were with the barley and the blue and the gold, not a lot of love, but now they go back to the baseball glove logo, and suddenly, at least speaking for myself, I'm suddenly much more of a fan of the team.
Yeah.
But I get so stuck in the logo world that sometimes I forget that maybe 90% of the world doesn't care quite so much about it as much as I do.
Right, right.
But it's got to have a factor on that.
Yeah. I found myself like during the Mariners Astros game, that 16 inning affair or 18 innings
Yeah.
that the Astros won 1-0. Every time they panned the crowd, and I was just sort of like, I wish I was a bigger Mariners fan so that I could like get more Mariners stuff, just because I like the sort of look of the thing. The Dodgers are another team like that for me, where it's like I couldn't give two damns about the Dodgers, but I kind of like their branding, right? Like really,
So classic.
is there a team besides the Blue Jays whose brand you would wear just because you like the brand, not because you have any sort of affinity for the team?
Oh, absolutely. And I mentioned some of them in what I just said.
Yeah.
I do have Milwaukee Brewers stuff. I have Padres stuff.
Mhm.
And it's purely because I like the logo and the uniforms, like, and the color scheme. It's something unique. And honestly, I can't hate the Padres or the Brewers. Maybe one day I can,
Yeah.
if they give me a
Right.
reason to. I used to think the same thing about the Texas Rangers. How could anyone hate the Texas Rangers? Now I hate the Texas Rangers, Paul.
This is pretty.
But
That's
absolutely,
funny.
absolutely, I would wear, like, I remember buying a Florida Marlins jersey like 20 years ago when they were wearing the teal, right? Just because
Yeah.
I thought it was such a unique color scheme and uniform, and these are the teams that I can walk around town and no one's going to give me a hard time
Right.
for wearing that team, just
Right.
simply because there's no rivalry here.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
that makes sense. You know what? I have sort of the opposite feeling about the Phillies, who I obviously love, diehard fan of the Phillies. They, my heart was broken in 1993. We haven't mentioned Joe Carter yet on this episode.
you're welcome.
Uh, but like the Phillies brand is one that, while I love the team, I don't actually super love the actual brand of the team, like the sort of round. I learned once that the name of the font is, I called the team to ask this question. The name of the font is Script Wurst, like a script sausage, like Script Wurst, Wurst with a U. And the red pinstripes I like, but they're like a little too thin, and they kind of make the uniforms look a little pink from far away. And
That's true.
so I don't love the sort of like round script. I wish they would put Philadelphia on their away jerseys instead of Phillies. I love the old maroon. I love the old powder blue, but the Phillies are an example of a team where, like, yeah, that team has my heart, but the actual like brand itself, I could, kind of take or leave.
Now, would you eat the Philadelphia Phillies typeface? It looks, with a name like that, maybe it's suddenly delicious. Put a little ketchup on it.
It looks like the Red Hots that you would get in Maine,
There
like
you go.
those little like
Yeah, the
super
little
duper.
sticks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I was going to add, well, the Phillies, it's weird that that happens now, and design is cyclical. But
yeah.
when that first came out, right, the maroon was considered old and dated,
Hmm.
and going to that, the red with the pinstripes was seen as like a big win for the Phillies and gave their identity some legitimacy. And the fact that they suddenly turned it around, and the Darren Dalton, John Kruk days, winning the pennant in '93,
Yeah,
when the new uniforms came out, that really, I thought at that point it was going to be the Phillies forever look, right? It was
right.
going back to a uniform from basically from the '50s that they
Yeah,
brought back. That was the trend in the early '90s, was to look to the '50s, look to the '60s.
yeah,
Whereas now it's like, maybe this is an every 30, 40 years thing, but
could be.
now the trend is, let's go back to the '90s. Let's go
Yeah.
back to the early 2000s. But so when the Phillies did switch in '92 from the maroon to the red, how did you feel at the time?
To me, it felt like a throwback, right? Like it actually did feel like a return to sort of a classic look. And the hues, like these sort of like primary hues,
Mhm.
right? Like even then felt like a little almost like jingoistic. I don't know how to describe it, right? Like there was nothing to me, there was nothing like unique about it. There was nothing, I don't know. The maroon and the powder blue just felt like so uniquely Phillies to me. And and then that was the team, that was the uniform that we associated with our only World Series, right, like in
Right.
1980.
Yeah.
And then obviously we had success in the early 80s, went back to the World Series in 83. And maybe the weird thing, like after that, like that 93 team was like so much fun, and it was they did so well, and then they were so bad right away, and the reputation of that team with like Lenny Dykstra and all the steroid rumors around that team, and Kurt Schilling turning out to be such a knob, and like my affinity for that 1993 team, with the exception of a few guys, Mickey Morandini and Darren Dalton, and it's that like success that they had sort of early on in that uniform wore off pretty quickly, especially because they were just terrible again right away after
Yeah.
after 1993 until 2006, 2007, maybe, with the Jimmy Rollins era. It's funny. And it actually took that, like, Jimmy Rollins, Chase Utley, Ryan Howard, Cole Hamels team, Shane Victorino, of course, to win in that brand, to make me really love it, right? Like to make me be like, okay, I'm going to wear this around. But there's a reason I think you see a lot of Phillies fans wearing the powder blue, wearing the maroon. Your Toronto Blue Jays have had a lot of looks over the year. Some of them sort of riffs on a theme, but they had that sort of one departure with the black uniforms and the the really different logo. Do you have a favorite? Is there a favorite Blue Jays logo?
I think what they have now is probably their best look. And going back to the split style font of the 70s and 80s, and really refining that, and making it more modern, making it. I don't know if I like the serifs on the current font. I feel like maybe that's just a step too far. But doing a powdered blue version of the regular uniform, for example, rather than doing a pullover, rather than doing a straight throwback, let's do a modern powder blue version, so that it actually matches with the rest of the set. I could do without the red and white uniform. Not my thing. I'm not into the Go Canada Go. I'm more of a, this is the Blue Jays, this is Toronto, let's make a Toronto Blue Jays uniform.
Right.
But yeah, I do love what they're doing right now. We mentioned earlier the City Connect. I'm terrified of what they're going to do with City Connect. But everyone out there, remember that City Connect uniforms are temporary. They will only be around for 3 to 4 seasons. And then, you know what? After that, it'll be probably 3 or 4 City Connect uniforms per year for every team.
Right.
And adds on the patches on the sleeves next year. Let's not forget that.
That's been a big thing, huh? The other, it's funny when you talk about City Connect being temporary. I mean, we had the Players Weekend uniforms, for so many years in a row, and some of those were good, some of those were bad. They were a little bit, we talked about the color rush. It was a little bit more like the team's brand, but more so in some ways. So
version one of Players Weekend, anyways.
Yes,
right. 2, when it was just everyone's going to wear straight white or straight black.
Oh yeah, that was wild. That's I sort of blocked that one out. I sort of forgot about that for sure.
Traumatic. And the reason behind it was, again, I like these ideas on paper, but in execution, the idea behind the all black, all white uniforms, where we're going to encourage players to wear individual colorful batting gloves or fielding gloves or shoes, or under sleeves and stuff, so they can show their personality. And it's not going to be distracting from the team colors in any way. But no. The first Yankees Dodgers game in how long, and both teams were wearing
that was black. I do remember that now. I remember that actually thinking, okay, here come these classic brands, and like, oh no, never mind. What
I always think about is, like, imagine a kid going to their first game in person.
Right.
And they've spent all year watching, or several years watching the games on TV. They associate with those uniforms, right? Like, they want to see those uniforms in person, and then you take them to a game, their first game ever, they're so excited, and this isn't my team. This isn't, there's no affection for it. So I always think about those, and also cross my fingers and hope that nobody sets some sort of major league record while wearing one of them.
Like the Nolan Arenado cycle when he was wearing the Father's Day uniform.
Right. Like... Derek Jeter, right? Didn't Derek Jeter get a record? Yeah.
The thing that sort of bugs me about this too is, like, you mentioned the Red Sox with their yellow and blue Boston Marathon themed City Connect uniforms, and they sell the merchandise, and people show up for these games wearing the merchandise. The Rockies game that I went to, and where they were playing in their City Connect uniforms, there's a lot of people walking around in the stands wearing these. And it's, I mentioned the feeling at the Mariners game, like watching this sort of sea of Mariners colors and really feeling like, man, what a strong, like, brand they have. To see these wildly disparate looks in the stands is really sort of jarring to me in a way. I remember being in 2009, the Phillies were playing the Rockies in the National League Division Series, and I went there all like Phillies up, right? Like, so it's mostly like purple and black, and I'm there wearing all my Phillies stuff. It was the game. The Phillies won 4-3. Ryan Howard had a 2-run double in the 9th inning with 2 outs. Come from behind win. Really dramatic. Yeah. Not that I committed any of this to memory, right? But I remember, like, thinking, like, okay, there's not that many Phillies fans, and when you're in a hostile place and you see someone else wearing your team's gear, you give them a little wink, a little like, hey, how's it going? So for most of the game, there was this guy sort of a section over and a couple rows down, and he had a red hat on. And I'm thinking, like, I'm gonna, like, after this game, I'm gonna give that guy a little fist bump here and just say, hey, go Phils. And he turns around, and he's wearing a Rockies 4th of July cap.
Ooh.
A red Rockies 4th of July cap. And I just thought, That's just so stupid. Right? It sort of like annoyed me, even though the Phillies had actually just won the series. I was like, that's just like the dumbest thing. Who wears a red Rockies cap to a Phillies Rockies baseball game?
But
So
in his defense, that was a genuine Rockies cap,
he
right?
was wearing an on-field Rockies cap. Absolutely.
And that's, hey, that's a great example of why these teams should stick to their own color schemes.
They really should. They really should. There's something to be said for brand equity, right? So
absolutely.
Chris, I've kept you way longer than I meant to, but I wanted to give my listeners the chance to get to know you, a celebrity, one of the founding members of the online baseball logo enthusiast community. You know, you've done so much for this crowd. So in deference to fellow podcast host Ed Rivera, who does this at the end of every podcast that he hosts the Dad Hat Chronicles. I know it's a great name, isn't it?
Yeah.
He asks some rapid fire questions. He calls them Ed's famous, not so famous questions. Ed, I apologize. I'm getting that wrong. But he's got some questions just to sort of get to know his guests. And so I want to borrow this from Ed and ask you some questions just to get to know you a little bit for our fans here. So
let's do it. Well, question one is, are you a celebrity? The answer is no.
I don't think you get to determine whether you're a celebrity or not. All right. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
All right. Yes or no? Pineapple on pizza?
No. My wife says yes, though. I'm very alone in this family.
It is a divided household. All right. Burritos or tacos?
I'd say burritos.
Okay.
Yeah. Tacos are good, though.
I think it's a good answer. I think it's a good answer. And Ed would appreciate it. Ed always says yes whenever someone says burritos. So he would appreciate that. All right. We, in minor league baseball, we anthropomorphize a lot, right? If you were to give human characteristics to any animal, what do you think the rudest animal would be?
Say a platypus.
Platypus would be rude, just from pure, identity confusion, right? Like, am I a mammal? Am I a reptile? I'm laying eggs over here.
If you ever run into a beaver in the wild, they can be quite obnoxious.
Okay.
And then I'd throw in the fact that it's quacking at you. I don't know.
A platypus is like a super beaver almost. I get it. All right. That's a great answer to the question.
Now it's 8 feet tall, and that's a little different.
Now this sounds like one of the Marvel mashups here.
Marvel's listening, and we're going to have
we're going to be rich. TM. Okay. What's your go-to concession at the ballpark?
I always get a hot dog and just ketchup on it. I know that's a lot of people from Chicago are screaming at their podcast devices right now, but yeah, I'm sorry. Ketchup on a hot dog, and that's it. And then a nice tall, cool Budweiser, as Harry Carey would say.
Very nice. Is there, I know that like every Canadian rolls their eyes whenever an American mentions poutine, right? Which I have already done on this episode. Is there a go-to concession in Toronto that is uniquely Canadian?
Oh, that's a good one. Uniquely Canadian. Can you even get poutine in Toronto? You have to be able to, right?
You would think, right?
My wife is screaming cauliflower at me, but I'm going to disagree with her. I don't think that. Oh, she's right. There's a cauliflower poutine in Toronto.
It's the best.
Okay. I don't know if you can hear this
bleeding. I do. I hear Kristen in the background there. Absolutely. So hello, Kristen.
Hello. I could not. Sorry.
So is that at the ballpark, or is that just sort of in general that you can get cauliflower?
It's at the ballpark. You can get it's a deep fried cauliflower, and they put the gravy and the cheese curds on it.
Oh my gosh.
It's a little spicy. I think they put the buffalo chicken sauce on it or something, but it's
wow.
It's tasty. It doesn't sound good, but yeah, I'll eat it.
I mean, if it's got gravy and cheese curds on it, it's going to be good, right? Like,
doesn't matter what it is. Yeah.
Do you have like a go-to thing that you like to put on poutine besides the gravy and the cheese curds?
There's the places around here, right? Like, because you can't just get away with plain poutine now, right? Like we've seen it, we've done it. There's one place here that puts pulled pork on the poutine, and I really like that. It's a good combination. But you also get like bacon or maple syrup, or there's pizza poutine too, where we have poutine pizza and we have pizza poutine.
I want to put those side by side. Actually, I want to have both of those things at the same time.
I was just talking to my mom about this the other day, about how there was a poutine pizza, and I had the option to order it. And when I found out that instead of pizza sauce, it was gravy, I was like, I don't know, that sounds like too much gravy.
Okay. Instead of sauce, too much gravy is, I don't know if that's a thing, right? Okay, last one. Yep. If you could be a character in any baseball movie, who would you want to be?
That's a good one. Well, I mean, my instinct was from the natural, but he gets shot, and that doesn't
He
sound
gets
very
shot.
good.
Yeah.
How about anybody from Major League Baseball, like the Major League movie with
Yeah.
Charlie Sheen? That would be a fun group to be around.
Yeah.
Henry Rowan Gardner from the Chicago Cubs, because then I'd still have another 30, 40 years ahead of me in Rookie of the Year.
I think I've actually thought about this question too. I think I might go with Nuke LaLoosh, who is kind of an idiot, but gets promoted right out of single A Durham in the movie all the way up to the Atlanta Braves, right? So that's and he's got his whole life ahead of him to
All right, fair enough.
go be a knucklehead. So I've thought about this. I think about these questions myself too.
Which player gets a huge signing bonus?
I think Nuke LaLoosh has to, right? Don't you think?
Well, there you go. Yeah. You don't want to be Crash Davis.
No, that's right. Because that was my instinct, was just like, oh, Crash Davis. And then like, no. Because then he's driving to Asheville at the end of the movie, hoping to like extend his career. So yeah, so not Crash Davis. Chris, this has been a lot of fun. I definitely kept you longer than I thought I was going to. I hope that you'll be around for episode 100 to revisit
Sure.
all of our fun stories. Thanks again for all that you do for logo fans and sports fans, and for giving me the break that I got to come write for sportslogos.net. It's a thrill for me.
Oh, Paul, it's been a pleasure having you on board. I love your articles. I love your story. I love your book that you put out, and it's featured on my bookshelf prominently in my living room there. So thanks for everything you do and everything you've done. And thank you for bringing awareness to ice cream helmet Sundays.
I've got about 430 of them back there now. The collection's
you do a traveling show is what you should do.
I really should. And the funny thing is I was actually going to be in Arizona this weekend and had to cancel because Amy got sick, unfortunately. But I do my Helmet Sunday playoff bracket, which you graciously retweet. I appreciate that. And so I was actually bringing my helmets with me so that I could recreate the playoff bracket at Amy's place. So then I didn't have to because she got sick. But yeah, the Helmet Sunday playoff bracket's a lot of fun, and it always incorporates logos, the playoff logos from sportslogos.net. And I always want to acknowledge that because I know that everyone goes to your site and downloads all the logos that they want to use because it's a logo encyclopedia.
I don't think I'm going to be retweeting now though, because the Blue Jays helmet's upside down. I
understand. I wouldn't expect you to anymore. I wouldn't either if it were the Phillies, right? Like, so I'm kind of wondering, like, if the Phillies don't win the World Series, at some point I'm going to have to flip the Phillies helmet, and it's sort of like,
right.
That doesn't feel good. But this is the first time since I started doing it that the Phillies are actually in the playoffs. So that's, the flip side of that coin. So, Chris, thank you so much. This has been fun. Look forward to talking to you again for episode 100.
Absolutely. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Chris.